Everybody, my name is Andrés del Castillo. I'm senior attorney at the Center for International Environmental Law based here in Geneva. And a big thank you to the whole team of the Geneva Environmental Network for putting this together, the Weather per Planet, and then the documentary that was one of the first documentary that I saw about the plastic crisis in general. And it's a really interesting documentary because it showed not only a local, specific part of the problem, but different angles from different perspectives, from Costa Rica to Malaysia to Seattle to Boston. So, okay, there's a plastic crisis. What you will do? Because when you see the documentary at the end, you say, okay, this is bigger than I thought, but what can we do? And what the international and multilateral fora is doing regarding to the question of plastics, because there's a momentum, and because there's a momentum, there is movement and there's traction, there is interest on the issue. So I work for the environmental health team at CIEL, and we are focusing in the issue of plastics since some years ago, but not only the last part of the problem, that is the waste, but the beginning also of the problem, that is, okay, where it comes from, and try to see what kind of solution we can apply, or how we can use the law, in our case, international law, to prevent environmental injustice in one case, and then environmental harm too. So if you can see in the picture, there is a clear example of an offshore platform and then plastic waste in a shore, meaning from the beginning, from the extraction of fossil fuels, 99% of plastics come from fossil fuels, either oil, gas, or coal. So there is a problem linked to that part. And in the movie, you will see many, many figures, and I want to just complement with two specific figures, one related to climate change, because the plastic production and use is related to climate change, and it continues to grow as currently planned. By 2030, those emissions could reach 1.34 gigatons per year. That is kind of the equivalent to almost 300 coal-fired power plants of 500 megawatts. And also on biodiversity, there is an aspect related to biodiversity degradation and loss. And there is a report from 2020 quoting already a scientific report that says that the rate at which plastic production enters the aquatic ecosystem is projected to increase by 2.6 times the level of 2016 by 2040, under the business as usual scenario. You can see some of the graphics that represent how the global plastic production had been increased since the inception, after or the Second World War. And you will see how we will double, triple in the next 30 years if we don't do something about it. That is not only related to plastic waste. So at some part of the presentation, we will talk about this global call for a treaty with one of the main ideas saying, okay, what we can do with the plastic crisis, and first will be, we need to reduce source reduction will be a game changer. Then we need to ensure also that there is a safe, just, and circular economy for plastic too. But we don't want that economy that currently is a linear economy to become a spiral economy, where the plastic production is growing and then there is not a circular economy, but a spiral economy at the end of the day. So we need also, and I will emphasize in this part in the next couple of minutes, the coordination between existing instruments, and then what is the need for consolidation of financial and technical resources, including scientific resources, and how we can work on policy development at the global level, because this is a global problem, a transboundary problem. On policy spaces, you can see four main spaces and related to specific instruments. First one, and there is one of the experts also presenting in this time, will be the Basel, and there is a convention on control on transboundary movement of hazardous waste, and we see that this is really, really relevant, that part, and the scope is limited trade of hazardous waste between countries, specifically the dynamics between global north and global south. And there's limitation also on this treaty, because it's focused on waste. And then there are also phases, so the failed solutions are not excluded. And that includes objective to reduce, but is not very effective so far. We will see, because as probably you know, from January 1st, there is a new amendment that entered in force, that is 3 amendments on plastic waste. And we will see the concrete outputs in the next coming 4 to 6 years, the impact of those amendments. And what are the opportunities with this policy space, with this specific convention, and that is functional and vibrant convention? There's a lot of good elements and great momentum after the adoption of the entry in force, not only on the Basel plastic amendments, but also on the Basel ban. Then we have Stockholm, that is related to persistent organic chemicals, or POPs. And there are some limitations on that policy space. That is, it only covers a specific, very, very specific type of chemicals, works on chemical by chemical, and the process to add chemicals, either to control or to reduce or to ban the production and the use of those chemicals is a slow process. And 2 weeks ago, there were one of the specific committee that is a technical committee that assess with a specific criteria if one chemical can be included in one annex or other. And there were a proposal that was the inclusion of one of the filters that is used or chemical use for UV filter, that is UV 328 filter. And that was an interesting discussion that happened at that time, because one of the criteria to identify if one chemical is a POP, a persistent organic chemicals, is to see the long-term transportation of that chemical that can reach specific parts around the world and spread the hazardous properties. And the discussion was if plastic and marine litter can be the pathway to those to the UV 328 and to other POPs to be spread around different places. And that was accepted, but then will be other program and process on that regard. So that specific policy space of Stockholm will be really interesting to look at the plastic problem, also a persistent organic chemical problem, and then there are opportunities on ban certain substance, and there is a robust scientific body. And the coordination, of course, with other conventions, like because the secretariat for the Stockholm Convention and the Rotterdam and the Basel is joined. So one other part is the IMO, International Maritime Organizations, and there is some advanced policies regarding to plastic, and is the port and marine source of plastics. For example, dumping from ships and fishing gears. There are limitations, of course, like all the political international instruments that is not well equipped to address land-based source of marine litter. And as we know, there are some data saying, for example, in the Caribbean, between 80 and 95% of the marine litter comes from land-based sources. So, and that is the same case for many places around the world where land sources of marine litter is the main problem, not the source of the sea. There is some opportunities related to fishing gear that is made of plastic, port reception facilities, and onboard consumption in vessels and ships. And this is a way also how to address plastic pollution on sea. And the dynamics are different than in the other two political spaces, so that give also an opportunity to talk about the issue and to raise specific concerns. And the last one is UNEA, United Nations Environmental Assembly, as the most relevant governing body for UNEP, and in general will be on environment. And this is the primary space where many things related to plastic can come together to achieve something specific, like a mandate to begin negotiations for a global instrument. That this is under current negotiations. There is opportunities, yes. Under the term or the wording marine litter, and that includes microplastic, there has been some significant parts of the agenda since UNEA 1 in 2014. Then the creation of the ad hoc expert group or open-ended working group on marine litter and microplastics, and the renovation of the mandate. And finally, in November last year, we had the last meeting of that expert group that did really interesting work, putting together many pieces of work on scientific and political instrument that could be relevant not only at the international, but also regional and national level. So, as I mentioned, there's a call for a treaty, and then the call is growing. We have a call, of course, from different civil society organizations and movements. We have the Nordic Council that released a specific and game-changing report last year, at the end of the year, more than 150 pages related to, okay, what could be the elements for a treaty and what is necessary to have a treaty related to plastic. Then the Caribbean region with the CARICOM and the St. John's Declaration calling for a treaty on plastic. Then the AMSEM also calling for exploration, that possibility, and then the Bamako resolution concretely talking about the need for a treaty. At the Pacific Island states, there is some regional plans where one of the objective is to call for a treaty and to start exploration, the negotiation for negotiating a treaty. At the European Union level, there are some dynamics going on there. As you know, the European Union Green Deal idea, there's push for the environmental agenda there. And there are two paths at the European Union that are relevant for the treaty. The first one is on biodiversity, and the second one, of course, is on circular economy and the plastic itself. And then on the biodiversity, we saw 2 weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, a presentation of a draft report from the European Parliament related to the plan for the Commission on biodiversity. And the Parliament is including this specific report that will be adopted in April from the European Union Parliament. And this is on biodiversity, to include and calling the European Union to lead the negotiations for a treaty on plastics. So the Parliament is seeing that connection between biodiversity loss and the importance to have a treaty on plastic. A side note is that in the current process for the post-2020 agenda on biodiversity, there are two draft documents on, okay, what will be the targets? And one of the targets is target 6 of the last drafting document, is about the ambitions for plastic pollution, to reduce plastic pollution and in the sea. So those processes also are really important because the ambitions need to be not only say that there's ambitions, but okay, concretely where can put that ambition? And then the biodiversity agenda is really important in that regard. So the UK also last year in a forum related to the WTO week on environment and trade, they say that they are supporting and they call for a treaty on plastic too. And this is a really recent movement on that regard. There are, of course, several Asian states and countries calling for a treaty like Malaysia, Philippines, and last year also there were a report where different multinationals and private sectors companies call for a treaty. And this is also really important because the argument saying that a treaty could be, more regulation is bad for business is not the case here, where big companies are saying, yes, we need regulation on plastic because they are seeing in many parts of the world, more than 120 countries already have a specific legislation banning from single-use plastic to plastic bags to specific polymers with food contact. So multinationals say, okay, what are the main rules here and how we can contribute to that problem too. From our side, together, CIEL with other organizations like Gaia and the Environmental Investigation Agency, three of us members of the Break Free from Plastic movement, we put together a publication that is translated into the 6 official languages of the UN related to what can be, the shape or the elements for a potential treaty. And here you can see how we put that together specifically in 4 pillars. The first one is monitoring and reporting. The second one, plastic pollution prevention. The third one, coordination. And then the fourth one, technical and financial support. On the pillar 1, monitoring and reporting, there is a need for harmonization where the treaty can play a main role on definitions, on methodology for monitoring and reporting, and standardized formats too. Then environmental monitoring, say, okay, what is the baseline? Where are we right now with seafloors, seawaters, shoreline, biota, freshwaters, and soils? Then indicators, then evolution on plastic pollution in marine and other environments, not only on marine, but also land environments. Then national data reporting, say, okay, internally, every country, what can we do with inventories on sources on virgin plastic production and use, then recycled plastic rates, then land-based source, sea-based source, and microplastics. And then the reporting on national action, also that will be a regular submission of national action plans and then a periodic review and update of those national action plans on plastics. So far, if I'm not wrong, there are more than 13 national action plans on plastic, but that could be more relevant if everybody agree on that, on what can content those national action plans that are really critical instrument for the policy development. And then there is a proposal for a periodic comprehensive assessment on the progress towards a global objective that is linked to the pillar 2, that is plastic pollution and prevention, with one specific part related to global objective. So far, there are 2 or 3 kind of agree objective, generally saying, okay, what we need to tackle the problem. And then there is a vision already that was concretized at UNIA on long-term elimination of discharge of plastic in the marine area. And then, of course, there's some global objectives on safe circular economy for plastics, but now here will be talk about the ambition. Okay, long-term elimination, but for when? We need that now, we're talking about a crisis on plastic, and then the European Union and the European Parliament is calling for a halt on discharge of plastic in the sea by 2030. So, but there's other instruments talking about 2050, and in a convention we can concretize that kind of global objective, saying this is our objective. We can work together, and multilateralism can work together on that regard. So on the plastic pollution prevention, we have the national action plans, of course, that I talked in the monitoring and reporting, then standardization and labeling, sustainable design, voluntary industry standards, and then what about virgin plastic pollution? How we can control the production and the quality and the standard for that production. And then there is a specific part here on prevention that is linked to the human face of the plastic crisis, that is remediation and legacy pollutions, that is linked to access to remedy for victims of plastic and plastic pollution. So, and then a third pillar is on coordination. And this pillar is related to some of the policy spaces that I already mentioned in the past, and will be related to how this umbrella treaty can make everything possible to coordinate different efforts and actions that are really valuable, and the scope will be different one from the other, but here can be concretized and summarized and coordinated in different aspects, from chemicals to biodiversity to climate change to agriculture. And then last, but some of the most important pillar is the technical and financial support. And we see from the Global South an emphasis on this part of technical and financial support for scientific assessment. Perhaps a panel could be the interesting body that can work on periodic comprehensive assessment, and then to produce ad hoc reports. And then also we need the social economic assessment panel to look also at the human face of the problem. Then implementing and bilateral agencies working together on that regard. Financial resources are critical for the success of any instrument, being a binding instrument or not. And on a binding instrument, we see how that financial resources could be relevant, and a treaty can boost that energy to fund solutions for the plastic crisis and problem. So here there is a timeline. As I mentioned before, on November 2020, the last meeting of the ad hoc expert group happened. We are expecting a meeting of the UNIA that there will be in two phases. The UNIA 5.1 this year, that is more related to general aspects of the environmental agenda. Perhaps there will be a call there for saying what intersectional can be done to keep that momentum related to plastic. And the support from member states here is critical to keep that momentum towards a concrete solution for the plastic crisis. And on February 2022, we will have to come together at the UNIA to concretize that ambitious. For us, it will be interesting to have a mandate there to begin negotiation for a global legally binding instrument. And this is also called for more than 125 governments so far. But we need consensus, political and scientific consensus in that regard. Thank you so much.